on the computer, so it's recording. Yep.
Thank you. Well, it's lovely to join you this morning, and thank you so much. I appreciate your time. You know, these are unprecedented times. So we're going to look at today, following the government's announcement, of course, that we can now return to work. We want to get as many people as possible to return to work. We need to look at what the actual implications are of that. So today I'm going to look at the factors to consider before reopening. So things you need to consider before you even open your doors, modifying your staff hours, being mindful of harassment, managing staff who refuse to return to work, and managing staff on their return, and of course workplace policy changes. So let's take a look and see where we can go with this. So of course, as we know, the COVID-19 lockdown restrictions are lifted now. Business recovery will be paramount. Boris Johnson said, and he continues to state, that he's encouraging as many businesses now to get back to work. Employers face many decisions around assessing business operations, of course, bringing their employees back to work and ensuring the workplace is safe. And this is what we're going to be talking about today. And the timelines will vary depending on what your industry, you're in, what it is, but it is a good idea now to start planning for reopening, because this will bring us a new set of employment challenges for you. And of course, what we don't want is for you to get this wrong, and then you're going to be exposed to liability if your sufficient precautions are not taken. So it's really important that you take into account what you need to do before you even reopen. So the first thing you need to do is a risk assessment. So if you haven't already done so, or you're considering perhaps getting people back off of furlough now, so more of your staff are going to be returning, you need to be conducting a risk assessment. That will ascertain the risks and the hazards that are in your workplace to ensure that it's sufficiently safe for them to return to work. Because make no bones about it, your employees are going to be hesitant. Many employees, from what we're seeing already, lots of them, I would say a good 80% of them, 85%, want to come back to work. So it's just only a small percentage that are a bit hesitant, but you need to allow for that. So your back to work plans are going to depend, of course, on your location and indeed the sector of work you're working in. And of course, your workplace may struggle to implement any new social distancing measures that are put into place. You've got to consider parents. Parents may find it difficult to go back to work if schools or day centres, are going to remain shut. And for the foreseeable future, that's what's likely to be. And it is unlikely that all staff will be able to return at once. So the sort of things that you need to be considering is, when you're doing this risk assessment, is really take yourself out of your business and think, right, if a total stranger was to come into this workplace, what would we need to do? So things that you need to be thinking about, of course, are special hygiene measures. Your hygiene is going to be paramount now. So you've got to think about not sharing anything within your office. So things like hot desking, or if you share a desk, share a phone, these things now are an absolute no-no. If you've got a canteen or if you've got a kitchen, these should be closed. Unfortunately, it's not going to be forever, but you can't allow your staff to get together where there's a place where it's all together. So of course, toilets present a problem. So the best thing you can do is signage. So think about your what's in place as far as your cleaning regime is concerned. Put physical screens between workstations. Unfortunately, we've all been encouraged to have these lovely open air, open plan offices, but of course now they're going to present a huge problem. The key thing to remember is that this virus, it's crazy really. We didn't even know about this virus before December, and now here we are, trying to return to work from what's been a global pandemic. But what you're trying to do is, and always remember that it's a human to human contact. That's how the virus is spread, human to human. So you must do everything in your power to ensure that doesn't happen. And don't forget, this 2 meter distancing is a minimum. So that's a minimum requirement. So really what you're trying to do is aim for 4. If you aim for 4, then you've got that leeway if someone leans over. Because let's be honest, just think about it. All of your staff are going to come back. The first thing they want to do is have a good old chat and catch up. And of course, give each other handshakes and hugs. That's human nature. So you've got to try and distance them to allow them to see that the measures you're putting in place are there for a reason. So consider screens around your workstation, social distancing, PPE, look at what PPE you've got, what's in place. Again, do you have enough? Make sure you've got all this in place before you reopen. And of course, things like staggering working hours, and we'll talk about that a bit later on as well, that's going to be key. You cannot bring all of your work employees back at the same time. You have to stagger, because again, that when you do a risk assessment, this is going to lower your risk. And of course, you've got to monitor their health and well-being. That's going to be key. You know, please don't underestimate, as a health and well-being consultant myself, that is going to be key to your employees when they return to work. Some of your employees are going to be very anxious. Some of your employees are going to be absolutely fine, no problem whatsoever, just, you know, going to be very keen to just crack on with the job. So you've got to allow for that. And don't forget, under the Health and Safety at Work Act, you have a duty of care as far as the health and safety and welfare of your employees. So it is up to you. You should consider which employees you make able to continue to work remotely. What the government is saying, from our understanding and what we know so far, and obviously this is changing daily, is that the more people you can leave at home working remotely, the better it is for your business. Obviously, businesses are going to need employees to come back to work, but if there's just a certain amount of, or a sector, perhaps I don't know, the secretarial sector or the call center, if that's part of your business, could that be left somewhere remotely rather than bringing everybody back into the same office? Those are the things that you need to consider. And employees with at least 26 continuous service can make a request for flexible working. So that's something you need to be aware of, which includes a move to working from home, provided they've not made a request under the statutory scheme in the previous 12 months. So this, you might see people now saying to you, actually, I've worked from home. You as an employer, as a CEO, might say, well, actually, this has worked quite well. You can continue to do that, but obviously you're in control. So contracts need to be looked at here. And remember, there is a statutory process for responding to flexible working requests in this situation. So again, it's something not to be taken lightly, because obviously it affects your business, but it's something you may be wanting to consider. Staggering hours, as I've said, will not only assist with the social distancing at the entrance of the workplace, but also ease congestion on public transport. So what you've got to think about is, as someone comes into your business, again, think about it from a stranger's point of view. Signage is going to be crucial. So you can see it already when you watch any of the news. You've got either footprints on the floor or round mats. Lots of the supermarkets have just kind of like round circles with reminders people to social distance. Have markers on your floor where people can stand and where they can't stand. It's particularly if you in your toilets, you've got male and female toilets and you've got disabled toilets, make sure there's signage on those toilets to remind people, because there's often doors that they've got to go through to get actually to the toilet, for instance. So signage is going to be really important. And it's really important at this stage actually to make you aware that, you know, it's not right to be putting up signs that you've just handwritten. You need to have a good signage system in place. That then says to your employees, actually, you're taking this seriously. Similarly, you know, alternating days off work for different groups or teams of employees may assist with the social distancing requirements. So really what you're doing when you conduct your risk assessment, you're ascertaining not only the physical risks to the workplace, but what risks are in place for you as an employer. Your main aim, and we appreciate it at Croner, is for you to earn money. You've got to get your business back on the road again. So if you do this now, this is going to safely ensure that there's going to be no comeback further on down the line. And also you can carry on your business and keep your business going now and build your business back up as you appreciate and as you adhere to the social distances requirements. And the employment laws require employee agreements when making amendments to employees' terms and conditions, even on a temporary basis. So you have to have consultation with your employees. So communication is going to be key. And it is advisable to speak to employees first and explain the changes you need to make and the reasons for the change. Now, whilst we're not seeing a high load of people calling in and saying they've got problems with their employees, we're seeing lots of questions obviously around furlough and statutory sick pay and annual leave, company cars, vehicles, etc. But what you need to be mindful of is that, you know, you have to converse. So communication is going to be really key. And I'm hoping that you've got a workforce where you can communicate and they will listen and understand what you're going through at the moment. Honesty is the best policy here. Be honest with your employees. Make them feel cared for. If you make a staff member feel cared for, they're going to feel valued. And if you make that staff member feel valued, you're going to retain them. And that's going to be key moving forward. You may need, of course, to take employees' individual circumstances into consideration, because a change to working hours might be difficult for example. You might want somebody to come in, say, Mondays, Wednesdays and Fridays. That might be difficult for them because of childcare arrangements. That's why it's really important that you liaise with your staff members and be mindful of what their situation is at home. Also is key, and again, we're getting a lot of questions around harassment. You should remind all employees of your zero tolerance towards harassment of any kind. Reissue your policies. Look at your company handbooks now. We've forgotten the Good Work Plan, which came into force, of course, on the 6th of April. So check your policies, your procedures, your contracts. This is the time now to make sure they're watertight. It may be particularly helpful to advise supervisors and managers of their roles in watching for or stopping and indeed reporting any harassment or any other discrimination. You could also remind all staff that you will immediately review any allegations of harassment or discrimination and take appropriate disciplinary action. Because we focus so much on the COVID-19, which of course we've had to, when you return to work, you're going to get the normalities, if you like, of absenteeism, the sickness and diarrhea, the migraines, the headaches, the backache, the musculoskeletal disorders. All those are going to come into play. And of course, health and well-being is going to be really, really important. But when you deal with any allegation of harassment, you make sure you follow your grievance or personal harassment procedure. So it might be worth just having a look at those now before you get your employees back to work to make sure that they're up to date. And staff who refuse to turn to work. Yes, a lot of this has been on the news. We've got a lot of nervous employees. Majority, as I say, from what we've heard, are willing and able and can't wait to get back to work. But you have got some that are very nervous and they feel that you're going to be putting them at risk if they return to work. We've had this actually this week, of course, with the schools reopening. All the teachers have gone up, and said absolutely no way, including the unions. So you need to work with your staff. You need to make sure that they're aware of what you're doing. So once you've conducted your risk assessment, you need to tell them then what measures you're going to be putting in place. Communication is key. And then talk to them. Talk to the guys, talk to the girls, find out what they need. The best way to get a safe place of work is if you communicate with your employees, the people that are on the ground doing the job. That's really key. You're demonstrating, of course, your commitment to safety by emphasising your efforts to keep the workplace safe. And as I say, signage is going to be crucial here. You should take the specific circumstances of an anxious employee into consideration, because, of course, this may be relevant to your decision making. If an employee still does not want to return to work, well, then you may agree to allow a new or extended period of home working, or perhaps arrange for them to take time off as holiday or even unpaid leave. But hopefully you should be able to communicate with your employees so it doesn't get to this, it doesn't escalate. If an employee point blank refuses to attend work without a valid reason, well, then you may wish to consider disciplinary action. But, you've got to proceed carefully, because COVID-19 is all new, because this is not written in any insurance policy, because you may only have just had a COVID-19 policy in place. You need to proceed very carefully on it. So again, take our advice. You can always ask advice on anything from us. So reorganising your workforce, well, redeploying staff may be an option for some businesses. So if your employees are agreeable and can be trained to carry out different duties in more viable parts of the business, this should certainly be considered. In fact, training of any kind, if you think about it now, some of your furloughed staff would have been off for 6 weeks. Some of them may even be, have been off right from the very beginning. So you've got to consider training. Remember that when they come back to the workforce, you need to, even if it's a 10-minute training, just a quick overview of what they do, operation of equipment, how to use PPE. Just remind them that, again, that's your statutory requirement. I would highly recommend you do that. And if you think a lack of work is going to be temporary, layoff or short-time working are measures that might be appropriate. And again, some of you may already be making use of the job retention scheme. It's still there. It's going to be on, as you know. We've now seen it's going to be on until the end of October. We know that the 80% pay of up to $2,500 gross salary is going to be paid right up until the end of July, and then it's going to be reviewed. So from the start of August, that will be a time when the government will be expecting businesses to kind of get back, and so that they can share the cost, really, so their salaries will be shared with the government. And you may also consider, of course, redundancies, but you need to follow redundancy procedures. Redundancies are a very particular procedure. So if you're considering that, then you need to be aware of, again, what your redundancy procedures and policies are. And if you've got any staff, that have got childcare issues, employees can carry out some or perhaps all of their duties from home. They should be paid accordingly, of course. Where employees are unable to work from home, they should be encouraged to make alternative childcare arrangements. But this will not be possible for all your employees. So you've got to, have a flexible approach on this. You should consider a temporary flexible working arrangement to adjust or perhaps reduce the working hours and change working times to assist employees in managing work and increase childcare responsibilities. Parental leave, unpaid, as well as paid annual leave may be solutions, at least in the short term. Don't forget, we are coming out of this, and what we do hope is that we don't get a second wave of the pandemic, so obviously we have to crash and close everything down again. So the more you do now, the more safety and the more procedures you have in place, the more you communicate with your staff, you're doing everything you can then to ensure a safe return to work for your employees. And even in circumstances where the decision to return to the workplace happens quickly, some people have gone back today, for example, you should aim to give employees reasonable notice of the return. So if some of you are perhaps thinking about taking people off of furlough now, or perhaps you want some more staff, you need to be mindful of what you're doing and how you're informing them. Employees may have childcare, as I've said, or other caring. They might be caring for somebody else at home now, perhaps shielding. They have responsibilities, and a return to the workplace may signify a need for them to make other arrangements. So in other words, the more time you give them, the better it is for your employees. And you should also be aware that some employees may not be in a position to return, and again, as I said, they could be shielding, they could be on sick leave, again, because of COVID-19, quite rightly, we've had to focus on that. But you could already have now people who are perhaps off with a pregnancy, they're on the maternity leave, they're on sick leave, long-term, short-term, they've got other illnesses and diseases. So all these things need to be taken into account, and be mindful that some staff may also have recently suffered a bereavement because of COVID-19, and of course just a dreadful bereavement anyway. So again, these things all need to be considered. And how you do it, well, have a pre-return to work conversation with them to discuss the return. Find out what they think they should have in place. Identify where there'll be any concerns over the return. Car parking. Have you got a car park that allows them to, if they're all returning at once, be it just a staggered amount of workplace. Is that going to be viable? Do you have a place where they can perhaps go and rest and take their breaks? Have you considered that? One thing, myself and Lee were talking about, you could ask them to work in their, to go and have their break in their car. If you haven't got an area that's safely distanced, that keeps this social distancing in place, you need to be able to say to your staff members they can go out and have a break. That's going to be critical. And also ascertain how they're travelling to work. We've been told that not to take public transport, not to use buses and trains or tubes. This could affect some of your staff members. Find out. It's up to you. It's your duty of care. And identify any adjustments or support they may need on their return. Some businesses are already laying on minibuses, for example, and having obviously the social distancing taking place in the minibuses, but that allows them to get their staff safely to work. Again, this is a time to come up with perhaps innovative ideas to make sure it works for your business. So when you've got all that in place, you've got this risk assessment, you then need to think about what we call a reboarding process may be appropriate, especially where employees have been out of workplace for a long time. So managers should hold one-to-one meetings if they can with the employees, and with a focus on their health and well-being. This is are you okay? Are you doing okay? What can we do to help you? The discussion should be used to confirm any adjustments or support they might need to enable the employee to carry out their role. And if your employees have access to an employee assistance program, or perhaps you offer some kind of occupational health program, then remind the employee that they have the opportunity to speak to a trained counsellor about any concerns they have. And of course, this is a confidential service you're providing. Also, another thing, it doesn't have to cost you any money at all. Just put up posters. Perhaps engage with your local charities. It's particularly mental health charities. Try and see if you can hook up with them to to provide support for your employees and to give them a place to go where, again, is confidential, but as you as an employer, you've been seen to be proactive in that. And again, in a court of law, that's always going to do you well. So if you've got any staff that have got annual leave, well, your approach to annual leave will depend on your specific circumstances, of course, and whether your employees have taken annual leave in recent weeks. The Working Time Directives 1998 were recently amended to allow carryover of the 4 weeks of annual leave, which is, some of you may already be aware of this. So if they've got the 4 weeks of annual leave that were previously exclusive to the year in which they were accrued, it means because of COVID-19, it can be carried over now into the next 2 leave years. But again, you need to take that into account. This is why so many businesses are now encouraging people to take leave, because otherwise what's going to happen, your business is going to get back into business, and I truly hope that does, and you'll suddenly find yourself that loads of people will suddenly want to take annual leave. So you need to be on top of your annual leave situation. So ongoing change to your workplace policies, you've got them back now. I would now consider, once you've had them back, say for a week, look at your risk assessment and adjust it accordingly. It might be that you've put things on paper, but actually when people return to work, actually this isn't working. So you've just got to think about that. So again, just have a look at your risk assessment and revisit it and see if it can be, what you're trying to do is to make it as safe environment as possible. So a thorough analysis of existing policies should be undertaken to include adjustments for recent legislation. And some of these policies may include, for instance, attendance, holidays, paid time off, remote working. Of course, you may have had a lot of people remote working. The working hours themselves, including start and stop time, the breaks, lunch times, flexible hours, staggered work hours, all these policies now, if you haven't got them in place, you need to make sure that you have got a policy for them. And timekeeping, including clocking in, clocking out, if that's one of your procedures. And leave policies, including your sick leave. Travel policies, including business and personal travel. Some of you will have personal vans, cars. What are you doing about that? How are you making sure that they're clean, or are they just given to one person and one sole use? Information technology and usage. So all these things those are just an example of some of the things you need to be doing. And then when will we return to normal? Well, that's a massive question, isn't it? And it isn't, it's not going to be for the foreseeable future. Your work is not completed once you open your doors and welcome back your workers and others. You will need to maintain routine cleaning and disinfection. So cleaning now is going to be key. If you've got somebody that comes and cleans your business, you need to make sure that they're efficient and effective. So this is going to be really important, and you should continue to monitor the COVID-19 in your area, and if necessary, be prepared to close your facilities quickly if another outbreak occurs, because make no amends about it. If we get through the phase 2, that was going to be excellent for business, but if we start seeing a spike and the R numbers go up, then the government will close us down again. So you need to be prepared for that. So in summary, there are a number of factors to consider before reopening. Your staff hours may need to be modified. Special considerations will need to be made in managing staff on their return to work, and new measures will likely to be in place for some time. So it feels like there's a lot of work to do, but once you've got that risk assessment in place, and as I say, you kind of say to yourself, right, this is what I'm going to do. We're trying as best as we can to make this as safe as environment as possible. And then when your employees come back to work, as I say, you might want to just revisit that. Now, of course, because you have an association membership with us, you have access to free advice. So advice teams are there. This is the number in case some of you haven't got it, not just around COVID-19, but you might have something around just HR, safety, tax and commercial legal matters. So just quote your association membership number, give that number a call, and they're there to help you if you can. But of course, I'm happy to take questions today. And thank you. That's it from me. Thank you.